we started by saying that this is what Huang proved, or our goal is to prove the theorem on your screen. This was proved by Huang in 2019, and this resolved the sensitivity contention. This is the goal. We will change the goal slowly. We will simplify it, not just change, but we will simplify the goal and then prove it. So how did we simplify? The first technique was to say that we can assume function to have full degree. Remember, our function was a Boolean function on n variables, and the first assumption says that we can assume the degree to be equal to n. Are there any questions about why we can assume this? We already know why we can assume this, because we can always, if there is a counter example to the main theorem, there is only one theorem on the screen. If there was a counter example to that, we can create another example where the degree is full, and that function is also a counter example. So it's enough to prove this conjecture or this theorem for full degree functions. Once we have made this simplification, another observation was to figure out what does degree of f equal to mean for us. And that we saw that tells us that the size of these sets v0 and v1, these are essentially the sets where function agrees with parity and function does not agree with parity. So these two sets v0 and v1, if their size is not equal, that means the Fourier coefficient of x1, x2, xn is non-zero. That means the degree of f is equal to f. This is if and only if condition. v0 or v1, at least one of them should be strictly bigger than half the vertices. This is what now we know. Degree of f equal to n is actually equivalent to saying that at least one of them is bigger than half. They are not equal. And once we know this, and observe another fundamental property, the property I asked you to look at it. The property was that actually the sense v0, this v0 and v1 are very, very inherently related to G. The sensitivity graph. How are they related to GF? You take the Boolean hypercube, you look at the induced subgraph. Again, this is the time to ask if you don't know what induced is. The sensitivity graph of GF is the union of induced subgraph on v0 and v1. You look at all the vertices of v0 and create all the edges which are there in the Boolean hypercube. You take v1, you create all the edges which are there in the Boolean hypercube. This graph, there is no other edge. This is the sensitivity graph of G. This is the important thing. That means we essentially want to figure out the eigenvalues of the induced subgraphs, because the union of the eigenvalue of the union of these two graphs is the union of eigenvalues of induced subgraph on v0 and induced subgraph on v1. This is not a hard fact to prove. Again, if you don't know it, you can take it as a that means so now what we wanted to prove, both of them have a very, very nice interpretation in terms of these subsets v0 and v1. The point is, suppose I'm given a subset whose size is bigger than half the vertices, then the induced subgraph has eigenvalue more than. This is the new target. This is the simplification of what we wanted to do.
So what was the relation between the spectral norm of the whole graph and the spectral norms of v0 and v1 here?
The spectral graph, the spectral norm of the whole graph is max of spectral norm of v0, the induced subgraph on v0, and the spectral norm of v0.
Okay.
Because see, important thing is, what are the eigenvalues of the big graph? It's the eigenvalues of part 1, the one on v0, union the part 1 with required multiplicity. So if some eigenvalue appears in v0, with multiplicity 2 and in V1 with multiplicity 3, then for the whole graph, that eigenvalue will have multiplicity
5.
5. So since you know that your eigenvalues are kind of getting collected together, then what will be the biggest eigenvalue? Either the biggest eigenvalue will be on the subgraph induced on V0 or on subgraph induced on V1, right?
Yeah, so the maximum of both.
That means, so there's a slight simplification. It might have happened that the biggest eigenvalue was in the smaller graph, but it turns out it's actually true that if you take a big graph, then its eigenvalue is big. Big means number of vertices are more than. So what Huang proved was, it's again, notice that this has nothing to do with a function. This is just a combinatorial, a graph property of the Boolean hypercube. If you pick a big enough subgraph, induced subgraph of Hn, that means you pick more than half the vertices, look at the induced subgraph. The induced subgraph has at least one eigenvalue more than. This is equivalent to proving degree of f is less than lambda f square. This is what we saw yesterday. So even if some part of yesterday's things are not clear, we can start with this. Is this statement clear? Are there any doubts about this statement? If there is any doubt about how we reach this statement, I can take it after the class. We can talk about this. But now let's focus on proving this. This is a very, very simple statement about graphs. There is a particular graph, Boolean hypercube. You can't say that you don't know it now, because the entire course was about Boolean hypercube. Given the Boolean hypercube, and if you pick big enough number of vertices, more than half the vertices, then the induced subgraph has eigenvalue more than. This is what you want to. Is there any term here which is not clear? How we prove it is a different thing, but do you know what we want to prove? Good. I assume that this statement is clear. We will remember this. We have an induced subgraph on more than half the vertices. We have to show that it has a big enough eigenvalue. Big means more than. So we essentially want to talk about eigenvalues of an induced subgraph. But let's see what we can say in general. Okay, so let's say.
So I wanted to ask, what exactly was the key point? I mean, what exactly was the most important idea that Huang made in his whole proof? Was it this particular statement, or
No.
was it all the conversions
No.
we did before?
I will come to that. You will see.
Okay.
These are called the signing of graphs. I will emphasize it as we proceed. Okay. Right. So now it is quite clear that you want to study eigenvalues of an induced subgraph. And this kind of a statement was kind of clear to Huang much before he gave the proof, probably 2 years earlier or something. At least it seems like from the blogs that he understood that this is what he wanted to prove, but how to prove it was not clear to him. And how he proved it will obviously be the matter of next 40-50 minutes, right? So first thing is, okay, we want to study eigenvalues of an induced subgraph. Suppose I have a graph G, leave alone induced. Let's say G prime is a subgraph of G. What do you think? What can you say about eigenvalues of G prime and eigenvalues of G? Or let's say spectral norm of G and spectral norm of G prime.
Spectral norm of G prime would be smaller than spectral norm of G.
Very good, right? This seems very intuitive. And this has a very, very simple proof. It's just true for actually any matrix with only positive entries. If any matrix has positive entries and you make some of the entries 0, the spectral norm will become smaller. The reason is the spectral norm of G is max over V transpose AV, where norm of V is equal. If you don't know this quadratic form, I encourage you to learn about it. It's very nice, especially in graph theory, and whenever you deal with matrices of graphs, this is a very, very important definition. For us, it's not needed, so I will skip it. But this is a formulation which will show this. And it is intuitive, right? As Udit said, the eigenvalue of subgraph should be small. Now, can they be much smaller? Can it happen that the spectral norm of G prime is very, very small as compared to cardinality of spectral norm of G? What do you think?
I mean, the subgraph having no edges will
Very
have
nice, right? So obviously, when you talk about subgraphs, there is not much you can say, right? You can have a subgraph which has no edge at all, and then all the eigenvalues are zero, right?
all the eigenvalues are 0.
Right. But then, as soon as you start talking about induced subgraph, things become interesting, right? Because now, when you talk about induced subgraph, you cannot have empty subgraphs. You can't have arbitrary subgraphs where you just keep deleting edges. This is where now induced subgraphs are going to be interesting. So what Cauchy's interlacing theorem tells us is that if you talk about induced subgraphs, then the eigenvalues of induced subgraph can't be much smaller. Okay, so it's kind of a inverse to this simple fact which we saw for the subgraphs. So yes, if we have a subgraph, then the eigenvalues decrease. But if you're talking about induced subgraph, they cannot be much smaller. That's the intention. And what is the exact statement? You take a graph G, suppose it has k vertices, then it will have eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2 up to lambda k. Right? This is just a setting. Now, if I take GV to be an induced subgraph on L vertices, that means L is, what is the relationship between L and K?
Smaller than K.
Yes, L is smaller than K, right? So I pick some L vertices out of K. Look at, again, important, the induced subgraph. Then the spectral norm of GV is more than, what would you guess?
Square root of
No, it's actually lambda n. Again, I will prove it. That's not the big part. I will prove it. The proof is not that difficult, but is the content clear? So it is saying that if you had only one vertex, then your biggest eigenvalue of GV will be at least lambda 1. If you take the subgraph on, let's say, k minus 1 vertices, then at least one eigenvalue will be bigger than lambda k minus 1. Okay, sounds good. Any questions about the statement of the theorem? We will prove it now, but the statement is clear, right? Okay, so let's prove it. Remember what you want to prove. If we have L vertices in the induced subgraph, then the eigenvalue is more than lambda L. The proof is simple. Let's look at eigenvectors of lambda k minus 1, lambda n. What can I say about these eigenvectors? They are each
linearly independent.
Actually, not just linearly independent, they are going to be orthogonal to each other because your matrix is symmetric, right?
Yes, yes.
So lambda k minus 1, if something has multiplicity 2, then the eigenspace will have dimension 2, and you can pick 2 orthogonal vectors. So definitely you can have k minus L plus 1 eigenvalues here. For each of them, you can pick a linearly independent eigen. S1 is the span of. So what is the dimension of this eigenspace?
minus k minus L.
Okay, again, think about it. You are almost there. Think about when L is equal to K. Do we have dimension 0 or we have dimension? It's just a matter of subtracting correctly. What is the dimension? What are the number of eigenvalues here? Why am I waiting on this for such a long time? This is the easy part, no?
+1.
+1, yeah. So why are people not answering? Okay, dimension. And then S2 is just your basis, standard basis vectors, right? Remember, in your adjacency matrix, each coordinate is marked by a vertex. So if V is V1, V2, then my S2 is just the first basis vector 1, 0, 0, 0, 0 and E2 0, 1, 0, 0. So whatever vertices are there, the standard basis vectors correspond to that is S2. So what is the dimension of S2?
Mod B.
Which is mod V is what? What is the size of the
K.
sorry?
K.
L.
L, L, L.
L. See, there were total K vertices in G, and I have picked L vertices out of it, right? L less than equal to K. Okay, so that means, what can I say about S1 intersection S2? The sum of the dimension is more than
More than
So
K
they will
+1.
intersect.
right. So what can I say about their intersection?
They have to intersect.
It's not
Sorry?
max.
I mean, they will have to intersect because
Well, there will be something in the intersection, right? It cannot be empty. So this all of you can prove. If you can't, take it as a small exercise. This is just checking your whatever first year linear algebra course you did. Think of the basis of S1, basis of S2, and then you will be able to find a common vector. You can actually construct a common vector between these. Okay, so this is not
I
fine.
think you should write here that the dimension of this space is at least 1 because the zero vector is always trivial in every vector space.
Oh yeah. So when I say phi, how should I say, is not so sorry. When I talk about subspace, this is the correct. Thank you very much. That's actually absolutely correct. When you talk about subspaces, 0 is always there. So what I want to say is that it is non-trivial. There is some non-trivial vector in the intersection, right? Call this, and this vector V will actually be our example where my length would be much more. Like the stretch in the length would be much more, right? So let's say G has adjacency matrix A. When I restrict it to V vertices, let's say the adjacency matrix is A. Now notice that V lies in the span of all the vertices of capital V. If that happens, then this is true. Do you agree? Again, this is something which I can't give a longer proof than this. You just have to notice that the entries in V are just the ones which corresponds to the AV part. So everything else is just getting multiplied with zeros. So AV is equal to AVV. And what can I say about increase in the length of V is element of S1. That means it is in the span of eigenvectors, all of which have stretch either lambda k or lambda k minus 1 or lambda n. Right? That means we will be stretched by at least,
Lambda n.
this will be stretched by at least lambda. We can make it more precise again by this definition, max V transpose A. Okay, you consider this quartic form, and it will, like this quartic form will increase by at least lambda. So that means the spectral norm of GV is greater than. I have shown you a vector where stretch is more than. Okay, if you want to formalize it, just look at this quantity V transpose AV, and you will see for this particular vector, V transpose AV is equal to V transpose AVV, which will be greater than lambda. Okay, you can take V to be a unit vector. That's so this proves Cauchy's interlacing theorem. Again, if the proof was not entirely clear, don't worry. The statement is more important for us. It is very intuitive. You can just look at the proof and do it yourself. You look at how I have gone through it, you can convince yourself that proof will work. Right? So what was the statement? I take a graph G, its eigenvalues are lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda k. If I look at the induced subgraph on L vertices, then at least one eigenvalue is bigger than lambda. Notice that this is sorted. Here I am sorting the eigenvalue. So it is bigger than the Lth smallest eigenvalue. Take L vertices, then my spectral norm of G will be bigger than Lth eigenvalue, right? So now, knowing this, remember you want to talk about induced subgraph. Lambda 1, suppose Hn has eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2 up to lambda 2 to the power n, right? The size of Boolean hypercube is to the power n. These are these many eigenvalues. If some set has more than 2 to the power n minus 1 vertices, that means at least to the power n minus 1 plus 1 vertices, then what can I say about GV0? It has to be bigger than lambda 2 to the power n minus 1. Right? So do you see this? This is just directly from Cauchy's interlacing theorem. Questions about this statement? Okay, good. So if I show this to be root n, then I'm done. Remember, what did I want to show? I wanted to show that if I pick any vertex set which has these many vertices, then the spectral norm of that graph, the highest eigenvalue, was bigger than root n. I know that this was bigger than lambda to the power n minus 1 plus 1, right? Cauchy's interlacing. So if this eigenvalue is more than root n, then I'm done. So the question is, what are the eigenvalues of H? Unfortunately, this is not going to work. I have given it as an assignment to find eigenvalues of H. They are symmetric. So what you know is that the lambda to the power n minus 1, what can you say about it? Is it less than 0, greater than 0? Remember, Boolean hypercube
Less than 0.
Less than equal to 0, right? But lambda to the power n minus 1 plus 1, it turns out is not going to be very, very big. It is going to be just, either 0 or 1. That's all. So this is not going to work, this argument, but it almost works. What do I mean by almost works? We will just modify our graphs slightly, and this was the most important trick. I think Vatsal asked this question. This is the most important idea in Huang's proof. We will modify our Boolean hypercube, our Hn, and then just use this interlacing property, and we will be done. So what is this? How are we going to modify Hn? These are called signings of Boolean hypercube. Okay, so from all the discussion, just remember Cauchy's interlacing theorem. Okay, we will use Cauchy's interlacing theorem and prove what we need. The only thing is we don't actually need to consider the adjacency matrix of Hn, but a signing of Hn. What is a signing of Hn? For a 0, 1 matrix, you assign -1 to some of the plus ones inside the matrix. This is called a signing. An adjacency matrix looks like this: 0, 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, something like that. For some of the ones, you just put a -1. Okay. This is called a signing. So how many signings are there?
2 to the power the number of ones.
To the power number of ones. But actually, okay, it makes more sense to consider signings which are symmetric. So if you are putting minus sign on Aij, then you put a minus sign on Abi also. Okay. So to the power number of edges, you can think of it like this. So you assign a sign to every edge. Okay. And then again, by this formulation V transpose AV of spectral norm, you will see that the spectral norm decreases. When you put some of the one entries to -1, when you reduce the entries, then your spectral norm decreases. Remember, this is true for actually any general positive matrix. You take any general positive matrix, you take any positive value and decrease it, and the spectral norm will also decrease. Anyway, how it is done, let's not worry about it, but this is true, right? So this is true. When we assign -1, then the spectral norm decreases. Now, what is happening? Remember Hn? Hn has eigenvalues over the entire interval -n to n. It has one with multiplicity 1, it has eigenvalue -n. It has with value 1 eigenvalue n. Then if you come up to n minus 2, this will be with multiplicity n choose. Then you come to n minus 4, this will be with multiplicity n choose 2. And somewhere here you have eigenvalue with n choose n by 2. Okay, if n was even. Otherwise, -1 will be with n choose n by 2, and 1 with n choose ceiling of n by 2. So it is very, very well symmetrically located between minus. What we are going to do with the signing is going to kind of collect these eigenvalues. What signing will do is we will come up with a signing such that the eigenvalues look like this. This are with multiplicity to the power n minus 1. This are with multiplicity to the power n. And then we will be done. Why? Let's again look at this. You have HNV, right? This is the hypergraph, Boolean hypercube, which you have restricted to V. The biggest eigenvalue of it will be more than if you take the signing and restrict it to V. This is because this is what happens with signing, right? When you do the signing, the eigenvalue decreases. So this is fine. Yes, no?
Yes.
Fine, right? And what do you know about this eigenvalue? This will be higher than lambda mod V of what?
Signing of H.
Signing of Hn. This is by what?
Interlacing theorem.
Interlacing. Now you know that cardinality of V is more than 2n minus 1 plus 1. This is lambda to the power n minus 1 plus 1 of Hn. But the way you have constructed Hn of S, this is more than. So the whole idea boils down to coming up with a signing of Hn, which has this very nice property. Notice that the spectral norm of HNS is smaller. What is the spectral norm of HNS, by the way? Root n. The spectral norm of Hn was n. So the spectral norm has decreased, but the middle values have gotten collected together. And that gives us a better bound on lambda to the power n minus 1 plus 2. So it is all about creating this sign. Any questions about this strategy? This is the main idea which makes it work. Instead of looking at Boolean hypercube, create a signing and then apply Cauchy's interlacing on that sign. So what you should convince yourself is that if I can construct a signing of Hn which has only these eigenvalues with to the power n minus 1 multiplicity, it has root n minus root n eigenvalues. With to the power n minus 1 multiplicity, it has plus root n eigenvalues. If I can create a signing of Hn like this, then I am done. Is that clear to you? Or there are any doubts about this statement? Any questions? So raise your hand if you understand that if we construct a signing, then we are done. Construct a signing with this given property, then we are done. Okay. Okay. So now we just need to create a signing. Right? This is again the proof. If V is greater than to the power n minus 1, I am calling the adjacency matrix to be AV. That would be more than the signing of AV. Remember that this is same as taking the signing of A and then restricting it. That's the same thing. It doesn't change. So spectral norm of AV is more than the signing of AV, which is more than lambda 2n minus 1 plus 1. And we will construct a signing so that the eigenvalues look like this. 0 minus root n, root n. Minus root n is with multiplicity 2n to the power n minus 1, root n with multiplicity 2n minus 2. I want to create such a matrix, and that matrix should be a signing of Boolean hypercube. That means it should have plus 1 or minus 1 wherever there is an edge of H. 0 everywhere else. Okay, but before I do that, is there an easy inductive way to create Hn? What is Hn in terms of Hn minus 1? Let's say these are all the vertices where the nth entry is 0 and the last entries are all which have the nth vertex, nth entry being 1, right? Remember, every vertex is a string of 0, 1 of length n. So first to the power n minus 1 are the ones where the last entry is 0 in the sequence. These are the ones where the last entry is 1. Obviously, I can divide like that. So now there are 4 matrices. What are those matrices? What will come here at the top left?
Hn minus
Hn
1.
minus 1.
what will come here at the right top? When can a vertex in first half have Hamming distance with vertex in the last half?
Like corresponding to the same, all rest the bits are same.
Exactly. So that means this matrix is
Like diagonal in that part.
identity, right?
Oh, okay.
And what about this? Lower left, lower right?
Again, HN minus.
Again, HN.
Trans. Yeah, HN minus.
Right? Correct. So this is the structure of HN. And now we want to assign plus minus. This is how we will do the signing. And the signing will also follow this structure so that it is a signing of HN. Okay. This is the Boolean, this is the, what should I say? This is the hypergraph on just one n equal to 1, right? This is 0, 1. How many vertices are there for hypercube 0, 1? 2.
2.
0 and 1, and there is an edge between them, right? So the adjacency matrix is 0, 1, 1, 0. So clearly A1S is actually equal to H1 and it is a sign. Any questions about that? And then the way I'm inductively defining it, remember, what was Hn? It was Hn minus 1, identity, Hn minus 1. So I'm going to respect this structure of Hn in this sign. So because of the way I am inductively defining this signing, it will remain a signing of Hn. So the first thing which should be clear to you is that the way I have defined things is going to give me a signing of Hn. I take a signing of Hn minus 1. I take the negative of that. I take a signing of Hn minus 1. I take a negative of that. It will still remain a signing of Hn. Because the 0 entries will remain 0. Some of the 1 entries will become minus 1. That's all. But it will remain a sign. Any questions about this? That the way I have inductively defined this, this remains a signing of Hn.
Sir, in the top right equation, it is an minus 1 s.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, you're completely right. Yes,
Okay.
yes, it is. It should be the signing, right? It is inductively defined, right? You're completely right.
So AIS is just the signing of HI.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Signing of Hn. Right. Okay. Second thing, can you prove that the trace of ANS is equal to 0? How can you prove that trace of ANS is equal to 0?
Trace of an minus 1
Induction.
plus.
Yes. Yes. The keyword is induction. The way I've defined, if I define something inductively, most of the time, to prove anything, easiest way is induction. And this is what
Actually, aren't all diagonal entries 0?
are all diagonal entries 0? Actually, yes, you are correct. And that will also be proved by induction.
Induction.
Right? Yeah. So this actually follows because it's a signing of Hn, right? In Hn also every diagonal entry is 0, right? Okay. For that matter, in any adjacency matrix of a simple graph, the diagonal entries are 0. Correct. So that's very, very simple. Many ways to prove this. Another thing is ANS whole square is n times identity. How will you prove that?
By induction.
Yes. Should I multiply, or you can see this block multiplication? Okay, let me do it. I'm going to skip S, writing S, because otherwise it will just be too cumbersome. Right? So what is the top left? What is the top left entry? An minus 1.
Square plus I.
What about top right entry?
0.
Why is that? It is going to be I times an minus 1. Sorry. Yeah, an minus 1 times identity, and then minus an minus 1 minus n. So 0, and then similar calculation happens here, right? So this is n minus 1 identity plus identity, n minus 1 identity, right? So it is n times n. This is also. But this is a strong property. What does it mean that ans whole square is equal to n times identity? If a square is equal to identity, and what do I know about the eigenvalues of a?
I mean, lambda square root of the eigenvalues of a square.
Right, the eigenvalues. So if a is symmetric, if a is nice, it has eigenvalues, then the eigenvalues of a square are just the square of the eigenvalues of. And what are the eigenvalues of ans square? What are the eigenvalues of n times identity?
N.
Plus minus
N.
square root.
Yeah. So okay, ans square has eigenvalues n. That means ans can have only eigenvalues either plus root n or minus root n. Remember, ans is symmetric, so the eigenvalues are real. That's the fact we are using. We have a very nice matrix. We have very nice matrices in our hand. That's why I can assume the eigenvalues to be real. And since it is real, whose square is n, then the eigenvalues are plus minus. Now the only question is about the multiplicity. So what can you say about the multiplicity? How many of them are minus root n and how many of them are plus root n?
I mean, equal number of it will be the case because
Why?
trace is 0.
Exactly. Since the trace is 0, the number of plus root n eigenvalues is same as minus root n eigenvalues. And then we are done. I have constructed a signing which has half eigenvalues minus root n, half eigenvalues are plus root n. Right? So let me just remind you of the complete proof. What was the complete proof? First, we said that we can assume that we have a complete function, a function with complete degree. This was the first assumption. Once we make that assumption, then what we needed to prove, that is what we started by in the beginning of today's lecture. If V0 has, size more than half, if size of V0 is more than half, then at least one of its eigenvalue is bigger than. This is what the next goal was. This was the goal for today. And how did we do this? We did this by constructing a sign. So GV0 is greater than the signing, because we are just changing some of the ones to -1. The highest eigenvalue should decrease, and this has to be bigger than lambda 2n minus 1 plus 1 of G of S. And why is this true?
Cauchy's interlacing theorem.
Cauchy's interlacing theorem. And this is more than root n. Because for GS, lambda 2n minus 1 plus 1 is first half eigenvalues are minus root n, next are plus root n. So everything fits kind of nicely, perfectly. And we can. Any questions? So this is one of the proofs from the book, which I always remember. It was kind of, it came in my lifetime. So it's good to remember. Such a beautiful. Questions? Okay, so let me finish the implications, then you will go for the quiz, and then you can ask me questions after the quiz. I will be online, right? What are the implications of Wang's result? First thing is a better relationship between block sensitivity and sensitivity. Why do we know the first part? Why is block sensitivity less than order of approximate degree f square? This was the result of
Nissan and Zagati.
Nissan and Zagati, right? This is upcoming from the same proof of approximate degree. Obviously, approximate degree is more than degree, less than degree. And now using Wang's result, degree of f whole square is more than lambda f to the power 4. So we know that for any function, block sensitivity has to be bounded by sensitivity to the power 4. Unfortunately, the best separation we know is of quadratic. This is the function which we discussed. We constructed a function composed with the OR, and we saw that the block sensitivity was square of the sensitivity. But this is the best separation. It's a big open question of what is the correct answer. Are there functions for which sensitivity can be much bigger than block sensitivity, more than quadratic gap, or actually block sensitivity is less than SF? We don't. And for many measures in between, these are the questions which we consider. What is the best polynomial? We know everything is related polynomially, but what is the best polynomial relationship? Those are the kind of questions people study. Another thing is this year, or okay, end of last year, people were able to prove that lambda f was less than approximate. This shows that degree of f is less than approximate degree of f. And this is again the best possible separation between degree and approximate degree. Approximate degree has to be smaller, but how small can it be? At most, square root of the degree. It cannot be lower than that. We didn't know that 1 year back. Now we know the tight relationship. Okay, so I will leave you with this diagram. You can go to Hello. The quiz will start in a minute.